Hello, my name is Dr. Janine Joy, and this slideshow presentation is a practice recording for a presentation that I am giving to a medical society and a medical group management association. Since it's a practice run through, it may have a little bit of instructions to myself about how to move slides around and stuff, but there's a lot of valuable information. When I'm giving presentations, I like to record myself in advance to make sure the timing's good and everything flows, and to just practice giving the presentation. This presentation is focused on improving health behaviors and employee engagement, preventing mental health issues and burnout. They all have the same root that extends out to those causes. And the title is Education Doesn't Work, This Does. And you'll understand why as we move through this presentation. So welcome, and let's get going. Okay, so what do you want? Do you want better physical health, better mental health, better relationships, better habits, more success, more fun? Yes, it's okay to want more fun, or less stress. Knowing what to do is not enough. Do you know what a healthy diet is? Do you eat a healthy diet even though you know what a healthy diet looks like? For almost everybody, the answer is they know, but they don't do it. Do you know that drinking in excess is unhealthy? Almost everybody knows that. Some people that know it, in fact, most people who do it, know it. Do you know someone who smokes and they know it's not healthy, but they do it anyway? Of course you do. It's hard to live in modern society and not know that smoking is unhealthy. How many know you should exercise more and do not do that? You know what you should do, but the motivation to do what you should do is what is hard to come by. Have you attended an employer health promotion event and felt worse after you went? That's because they're trying to educate you on things you already know, and it makes you feel guilty that you know you should do these things and you're not doing them. Do you know somebody that uses illegal drugs and that are dangerous, and they know they're dangerous and they do it anyway? Do you know anyone who's paid heavy prices for doing that and still does it? What is drinking and drug abuse? It's basically an attempt to feel better by someone who lacks stress management skills that are more effective than drinking and drugs and carry less risk. Education or stress management. Reminding someone what they should do or not do can increase their stress level. Most people already know what to do and what they should do. It's getting themselves to do it that is the problem. Change requires motivation. Well, how do you get motivation? Well, you want something, but you also have to believe that you can do what you want. That's empowerment. Healthy core self-evaluations support empowerment. They include healthy self-esteem and self-efficacy beliefs that make you believe that you can be successful. If you don't think you can do it, it's really, really hard to make yourself do it. It requires willpower, which is a limited resource. And then resilience, which includes optimism, an internal locus of control, which is the belief that your actions and thoughts and words will change your future. And it also requires healthy self-esteem, which I've already mentioned. So you have to have these factors in place if you're going to be successful in changing your own behavior. And other people need these factors too. Just telling someone what is good for them does not give them the power to do what's good for them. So we've all been educated on eating healthy, we shouldn't smoke, we should maintain a good weight, we shouldn't do drugs, we shouldn't drink alcohol. Once somebody knows the basics about this, further education returns very small gains, yet many organizations focus on repeatedly teaching people that they should not do these things. One common example is the DARE program. The DARE program actually can worsen results. There are research studies that have looked at it, and children who went through DARE are more likely to have problems than those who did not. And yet we continue spending millions and millions of dollars a year on that education element. It would be better spent in another way. Why does education not work? Rational mind is an oxymoron. Our minds are not rational. Our society tells us that we think rationally, but we don't. And we know it. We have all the research we need to prove it, yet this persistent myth gets in our way. Confabulation is something where we remember things that didn't happen or we distort things that did. It's why eyewitness testimonies are so unreliable. And it's really something that our brains do, because our brains don't just see reality, they interpret reality. And pay really close attention to that last sentence. Most people confabulate sometimes, and mundane examples occur regularly. We all do this. This is how our rational minds actually work. They're not so rational. And then we have cognitive biases. The last time I counted, there were 186 documented cognitive biases. They affect our decision-making processes, our behavior, our estimations of risk and probability, our beliefs, which affect our automatic thoughts. There are social biases and memory errors. All of those are attributed to our mind, which is supposedly rational. The fact is that stress kills and happiness heals. Food is the #1 anxiety drug, and 18% of the population suffers from anxiety every year. What does that mean? That means that people who have anxiety are not going to control their food intake the way they would if they felt better. Anxiety is an indicator that someone is stressed. There's also new research, quite a bit of it, on what impacts our weight, our BMI. Well, it used to be, we were told again and again and again, calories in, calories out equals whether we gain or lose weight. But we found that that simple understanding is not accurate. When our bodies are stressed, they do not process food as well as they do when they are not stressed. In fact, someone eating a healthy meal when they're highly stressed, the way their body will process that food can actually make the result of eating that healthy food when they're stressed the equivalent of eating an unhealthy meal. So our health status, our mood and our mindset, and our stress level also impact our weight, not only by the choices of what we eat, but by how our body processes the foods we do eat. 60% of individuals who still smoke suffer from anxiety, and many of them believe that smoking helps them deal with their anxiety. Well, clearly, helping them with their anxiety first would help them become non-smokers. But just pushing more emphasis on stopping smoking without addressing anxiety adds to their anxiety. Emotions impact our decisions. People experiencing positive emotions are more likely to choose healthy foods. They're more likely to exercise. Some of the research showed that 41% of the people who know that exercise reduces their level of stress don't exercise when they feel quote unquote too stressed. And as far as healthy foods, people who are on diets, who have made a commitment to lose weight, not only go off their diet, but they choose higher calorie and higher fat foods than they would normally eat, even when they're not on a diet, when they are stressed. People who are experiencing positive emotions, which is an indicator that they're experiencing low stress, sleep well, and they also avoid and do not select unhealthy and risky habits. And they also have better relationships with others, which further reduces stress and enhances well-being. This chart is very long. For those listening to the recording, you can stop and peruse it. For those in the audience, this is one of your handouts. All the citations to support all of these outcomes are in my books, and all of it is documented by peer-reviewed research that has been published. So you see that healthy habits of thought lead to better mental and behavioral health. Employee physical health is better. Employee engagement is better. There's less burnout. Diversity appreciation is better. There's less racism and more inclusion. There is improved emotional intelligence. There is increased resilience. Immune function, cognitive, digestive, and central nervous function is better when you're less stressed. Those are a lot of reasons to learn how to be less stressed. So, how do we deal with stress? There are 7 different categories of coping styles, and different categories can help us in different ways. The old toolkit only had 5. Everything from dysfunctional, maladaptive, palliative, and adaptive coping were in that old toolkit. The new toolkit includes advanced coping and transformational coping. Now, in the past, these could have been available from a therapist, but today they are available in group classes that are not one-on-one, and they are not group therapy. They are educational sessions. They're also taught in my books, especially my newest book, on maintaining mental health. So we'll go through what these different coping styles look like. The old toolkit we'll go through very briefly, and for those in the class, there's a handout that gives details about all of these different styles. So dysfunctional, drugs and alcohol, and other things listed on the chart. Maladaptive is suppressing emotions, self-criticism, all sorts of things that make things worse slowly. Dysfunctional makes things worse fast. Palliative strategies rest your mind. They take your mind off the stress, but they don't change the situation at all. Adaptive strategies involve learning skills and applying goal setting, budgeting, learning anger management, various things like that are adaptive. They give you more skills to address the stressors that you have. So, for example, learning advanced and transformational skills is adaptive when you decide to learn it, and then it's advanced and transformational when you apply it. Advanced stress management strategies give you a real advantage. They help you see solutions instead of problems. And I really had a hard time coming up with how to best illustrate this. So I have 3 different illustrations because this is such an important concept. This next one shows that instead of getting stuck in that maze, you can leap over it or go around it. You see the bigger picture when you use advanced stress management. Advanced stress management strategies, basically, you experience a situation and then you use tools to change the amount of stress you're experiencing, which increases your cognitive ability to address the situation. You can go from an initial evaluation of a situation that there is no solution and work your way to where there are solutions and there are solutions you're capable of accomplishing, all the way around to a zero stress where you actually see the problem as an opportunity. So there's different levels, but each, as you move around that diagram, and the diagram's later in this presentation, you actually feel less stress, and every time you feel less stress, you feel better. Transformational stress management strategies, on the other hand, are at the level of belief, because our beliefs direct our automatic thoughts. If you believe you're good at something, your automatic thoughts when you're faced with the situation, when you need that knowledge or that skill, are different than they are if you don't think you're good at it or if you think you're bad at it. If you think you're bad at it, your stress level is going to be enormously greater than it would be if you thought you were good at it. So when you change your belief, your first thought is less stressful. And one of what makes it transformational is that when you change some beliefs that make you feel more empowered, it's not one situation that's less stressful. It's a lot of situations. It's a daily benefit that gives you an advantage for the rest of your life. So basically, life plus unhealthy habits of thought equals chronic stress. Life plus healthy habits of thought equals less stress. Life without good stress coping skills equals chronic stress. Life with good coping skills equals less stress. So I want to give you a really quick example. I'm going to run through this really quickly. So imagine that this is you, and it's the very beginning of a day. And imagine, and I know for most people this is a fantasy, it's not reality, but imagine you wake up feeling relaxed and not stressed. So you're starting without stress. And then you get out of bed and you stub your toe and you think, oh, it's going to be one of those days, and the stress just latches onto you. And then there's a lot of traffic on the way to work, and there's more stress. You're stressed about being on time, you're stressed about what you have to do when you get there, and you just don't like driving in this traffic. And then you get to work and you're a little bit late and your boss looks at you ugly, and that more stress adds on. Now it's stress about your job. And then you've got that meeting you've got to get to that you planned to have some time to deal with before you had to go, but now you just got to go or you'll be late to that. That adds more stress. You get to the meeting and there's people that needed to be there who aren't there, and there's people there that you didn't want there, and that adds more stress. And then the meeting runs long and you miss your lunch, so now you're hungry. That adds more stress. And then your child's school calls and there's been an issue and you're going to have to deal with that tonight, and that adds more stress. And the whole day just keeps going. It keeps adding all this stress. So healthy habits of thought reverse this process. So all these stressors, if you have healthy habits of thought, each one, you're in traffic and you're thinking you're going to be late. You think, that's all right. I can actually think about the meeting that I wanted to prepare for while I'm driving. I don't have to be at my desk to do that. So I'm going to do that now while I'm in traffic, and I'll make this time useful. Stress drops away. And then when the child's school calls, you think, you know what? I knew something's been going on. Now I know what it is. Now that I know, I can deal with it. That's a good thing. And then when you miss lunch, you remember that you brought something with you from home. So you actually have some food. That stress goes away. And the people who showed up to the meeting that you didn't want actually made some really great contributions that they probably wouldn't have made if the people that you wanted there had been there. So more stress falls away because they brought some new insights to the meeting. And then you start thinking about, you know what, I do a really good job. My job's not in jeopardy if I'm a minute late. The boss knows there's traffic and it varies greatly day to day. I'm not worried about being in trouble because I'm a minute late. And actually, I was working on the way to work, which I can even tell my boss I was doing that, and that makes less stress. So now you're down to this load that is much more bearable. And you can even deal with those things and use the processes to get rid of those and end up right back where you were and actually go to sleep with no stress so that you have a really good chance of actually waking up with no stress. So healthy habits of thought and transformational habits of thought can actually keep that stress from piling up in the first place. Because you noticed on the prior example, there were some hooks that stress could latch onto, right? Well, when you've done this for a while, when you've learned advanced and transformational stress reduction strategies and applied them, guess what? There's no hook. So here's the stressor, and it comes and it tries to latch on, but there's no place for it to latch, and that's a pretty good outcome, wouldn't you say, if your stressors can do that? And that is what happens when you use these strategies. And because you feel better, low emotions are an indicator that you're stressed. Positive emotions are an indicator that you're not stressed. So when you do this, you feel better, which gives you motivation to do it again. So if our rational mind is not going to get us to do the things we want to do and not do the things we don't want to do, what does work? Well, let me tell you a story about a chicken and an alien. Imagine for just a minute that an alien has come from another planet and taken up residence on Earth, and we didn't put him in a cage to study him. We let him live among us. And he has learned that humans eat this thing called chicken. He's never seen a chicken, he's never eaten a chicken, but he wants to have his new human friends over and fix dinner for them. So he gets a chicken and he gets a recipe off the internet. And the recipe says to cook the chicken until it's 120 degrees. So he does that, and it doesn't look exactly like the picture, but he has no other basis of comparison because he's an alien and he's never seen a cooked chicken. So when the guests arrive, he proudly serves this uncooked chicken because the recipe book was wrong. It's at 120 degrees internal temperature for a chicken, and it's really 160 to 165. But he didn't have any basis of comparison. He didn't know what he was doing wrong. He followed instructions. Well, that is what we as a society have done with emotions for a very long time. We have had the wrong recipe. Early researchers lamented the unpredictability of emotions and wondered why we had them at all, because they seemed to serve no purpose. The reason they thought emotions served no purpose was because we were misinterpreting what they meant. And the really good news is that in 2007, a review of the literature about emotions brought about a new theory that helps us accurately interpret what our emotions are telling us and how to respond in healthy ways. So first, there's a lot of false premises about emotions, but I'll touch on just a few. Other people have the power to make you feel an emotion. False. Someone other than you is responsible for your happiness or other emotions. False. Negative emotions about others' activities tell us whether they are good or bad people. False. there's a little caveat there. You have an internal barometer, what I call a creep alert, that lets you know when somebody is up to no good. But it feels different than just looking at somebody and judging them as bad because of their clothing or their language. If you've ever had the experience where you knew someone was up to no good, where they made the hair on the back of your neck stand up, that's your creep alert. That's the emotion that tells you that somebody's not good for you. Just a negative judgment about that person because they're a different religion than you are, a different race, or because they're not tidy, they don't have good hygiene, any sort of thing that you use to judge someone and feel negative emotion that doesn't fall into that creep alert category. If you're deciding based on that negative emotion that that person is bad or good, you're using your emotions incorrectly. And the last false belief I really want to focus on is that you can't control your emotions. You cannot directly control them, but you can have great control over how you feel day in and day out, hour after hour, and even minute by minute. So I want to elaborate on this last one, the inability to control your emotions. If you're driving a car at 60 miles an hour down the road and you want to turn to the right, you don't climb out of the car and try to turn the wheel with the force of your muscles. You turn the steering wheel. Well, trying to directly change your emotion is like climbing out of the car and trying to change that wheel using your muscles by grabbing a hold of a wheel that's moving 60 miles an hour. It's not a good idea. But if you stay in the car and you change the steering wheel, which is your thoughts, you can change the emotion. So that analogy can help you see that you can change your emotion. You just can't do it by trying to say, I don't want to feel this way, I want to feel this way. You have to change the thought that is making you feel the way you're feeling. And because it's your thought that determines how you feel, and you're the only one who can think your thoughts, no one else can make you feel how you feel in any given moment. Okay, so this new research, and there's a growing body, I've cited some of the major papers on it, indicates that positive emotions are telling us we are moving towards self-actualization. Basically, they mean keep going. Negative emotions are road signs telling us we're moving away from self-actualization. Now, there's one caveat I always like to put in here. If somebody has given no thought to long-term goals, then this really isn't going to be as much use to them as it would be if they had, because short-term goals will have a lot of positive emotions. Let's go back to weight. If somebody has not set a long-term goal to maintain a healthy weight, and that piece of chocolate cake looks good, they're absolutely going to feel positive emotion towards eating that piece of chocolate cake. But if they have a long-term goal to maintain their weight, they're going to balance. They may eat the cake, but they're going to balance it out. They will be guided automatically to make better choices about the other things they eat that day. They're not going to have the big dinner. They might have a salad with low-calorie dressing or just lemon juice on it. They're going to make choices that balance it out, or they may forego that piece of chocolate cake. It's up to them. It's up to each individual how they respond. But the emotion that goes with it, if you have a long-term goal to maintain or lose weight, and that piece of chocolate cake shows up as a possible dining experience for you, you may not even feel drawn to it, even though you would normally enjoy it. Just the thought of eating it doesn't feel as good as it would if you didn't have those other goals. And you can enjoy your steamed broccoli as much as you might have enjoyed that cake. Your emotions will reinforce your goals. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. We all have cellular communication going on in our bodies. The newest research says that it's done with biophotons, which actually explains the speed, which old theories did not explain the speed of cellular communication. When you look at all the research about the outcomes, the cognitive outcomes, the immune function outcomes, digestive outcomes, you compare it to the emotional state, you see that as stress increases, that functionality in your body declines. And I've created this example to illustrate. So in the sweet zone, someone is not stressed. They're feeling happy, joyful, so on and so forth. So the top of this funnel is the amount of clear cellular communication available to each person. The bottom, the spigot, what comes out of the funnel, the actual clear cellular communication that we experience, is determined by how much stress we're experiencing. Think of it as a line that has static. And the more stress we have, which means the lower the emotional state we're experiencing, the more static there is on the line. So you can see on the bottom that when we're happy, that clear communication is happening and good health is maintained. In the hopeful zone, it's still mostly very clear communication. But as we move down into pessimism and apathy or frustration and blame and resentment and anger and rage and jealousy and grief, the amount of clear cellular communication that is going on in our bodies declines. And this is evidenced by our worsening health, worsening cognitive abilities, worsening digestive function, and worsening central nervous system. So I like this example because it illustrates why lower emotions lead to worse outcomes. Okay, this diagram approaches something from another perspective. When we want to feel better, when we want to, let's say in a relationship, because this was really it's about our own behavior, but it's also about other people's behavior. We all have, I like to think of it as different selves that we can be at any given time. Who I am when I'm tired is not the same person I am when I'm energized. So there's this self-actualized self, which is our absolutely best possible self. And we never really get there because as we get better, our self-actualized self gets better. But our best possible in any given moment, there's that we've all had those days when we've just absolutely been hitting it on all cylinders. We're doing a fantastic job and we just feel it's indescribably good. That's our really best ever at that point in our life. Well, what impacted that? Our mindset impacted it. Our experience impacted it. If we had experience that let us feel confident with what we were doing, maybe we were skiing and we've gone skiing before, we're going to feel better than we would if we were scared going down that slope. Our education prepared us. Our goals, setting our goals, focusing on our goals, our available resources, and our habits of thought all impact our best ever. Our relationships can enhance our best ever or detract from. They can go either way depending on the quality. So things that reduce our ability to be our best ever right now, if our emotional state is lower, if we're tired, if we're stressed, if we're hungry or thirsty, if we're experiencing pain or illness, if we've taken alcohol or drugs, all of those can decrease our best possible performance in this moment. Now, why is this important? Well, a lot of times we beat ourselves up because we didn't do as well as we could have done when we think about it after the fact. But the fact is, after the fact, you're probably not as stressed as you were during the situation. And stress reduces your best in the moment. So you're basically evaluating how a version of yourself that exists when you're stressed performed and comparing it to the version of yourself and what you could have done when you weren't stressed. It's an uneven comparison. It's unfair. And doing that makes you dump on yourself in ways that do not help you because it lowers your emotional state. It might bring on guilt. It might bring on frustration. There's all sorts of reasons that it will make you feel worse if you do this to yourself. So understand that your best ever and your best right now are seldom the same. Do your best to move yourself in ways that make you more likely to be able to reach your best ever. But don't beat yourself up when you don't get there. So the other thing that this helps is when we are interacting with other people. Let's say somebody said something to us that was hurtful. Well, were they already stressed? Were they tired? Were they hungry? Were they thirsty? Were they in pain? Were they sick? Had they been drinking? Give them the benefit of the doubt. Give the person that they can be the benefit of being who they really want to be and realize that they probably failed their own standards when they upset you. And take that conversation deeper. And you'll be able to develop and maintain better relationships, which will help you. And so understanding these things, and it's sometimes easy to see it with young children and less easy to see it with adults, but it's no different for adults. These things still impact our ability to function, and they impact our ability to think. So we can't be as smart when we have things that are reducing our ability to be our best right now as we can be when we're at our best ever. So there's an exercise that you can do, and you can do this from any emotional state. This example just happens to be when you're worried. So you're worried about something. You can write a sentence that says what you're worried about. And you have two basic choices. Thoughts that are more satisfying, which means less stressful, or thoughts that are less satisfying. And you can draw this sort of diagram to help you find thoughts that are going to make things less stressful for you. And we don't have time in the session to do this, but draw this diagram in your notes and try it with something that's bothering you. Don't try it with the biggest problem in your world. Try it with something a little easier. Get used to how it works before you tackle the big problems. You would not learn to drive in a Formula 500 racing car. If you try to tackle your biggest problem first, that's what you're trying to do. You learn to drive probably on a tricycle or one of those little power wheels. You learned how the steering wheels work. You started learning about what happens when you're moving versus when you're stopped. And you added to that with bicycles and all sorts of things throughout your life before you got behind the steering wheel for the first time. In the same way, you want to do that with these techniques and strategies. So here's an example that I did for more satisfying thoughts when you're worried. Just reaffirming that you're strong enough to handle that anything life sends your way. Recognize that most things people worry about never happen. Find some hopeful thoughts that your fears aren't justified. Look for examples of other situations where maybe you worried about this or other people worried about it and it never happened. Trust in the training of the person you're worried about to see them through. We often worry about, for example, our children, but our job is to train them to be able to handle situations. So put your effort into helping them be prepared and then trust them to be prepared. Your trust in your child or anyone actually has an influence on the outcome. And then having faith or trust. So less satisfying, and a lot of people's minds have been trained to where they automatically go to the less satisfying side. But you can retrain your mind so it doesn't do that. So the less satisfying thoughts might leave you immobilized with fear. They might make you fearful. They might involve not trusting that the person you're worried about knows what to do or will make good choices. You might feel sure that if something could go wrong, it will. You don't have faith that things will turn out. Or you're afraid you're not strong enough to handle what life sends your way. All of these perspectives tend to be self-fulfilling prophecies, and they tend to influence the outcome. So leaning towards more satisfying thoughts and even just a small change can make a big difference in how you feel. So this is that stress scale that I mentioned earlier, where at the height of the scale you see a problem is unsolvable. And then using a process like the one we just looked at, you can move yourself around. If the situation doesn't change, but you move yourself around this where you start seeing it as potentially solvable, and maybe you see more solutions, and then you become confident that a solution will solve the problem, or you may even begin seeing an opportunity that is created by the situation. And these are all different perspectives about one thing, and this can be applied to nearly any situation. And you go back here and you say, okay, well, I have been spending a lot of time in that hot zone, and I need to work my way up to where I'm in better feeling emotional state. And when people recover, when people go into remission, that's what's really going on. So you think a thought and you feel an emotion. Some people have been trained to suppress their emotions. It's really difficult for them to identify what emotions they're feeling and to think about it. Their brain automatically just suppresses that information because they've trained it to do that for so long. There are ways to become more aware of your emotions, but there is a second indicator. It's a redundant system our bodies have to let us know. Stress is indicated by emotion, but it's also indicated by our energy level. Initial hits of stress, they can really energize us because that's the flight and fight versions. But chronic stress lowers our energy. If you think you can do something, you're energized to do it. If you want something but you don't think you can have it, your energy's low. So that's another way for someone to identify energy levels that help them identify whether they're where they want to be. If your energy level is low, you're not thinking thoughts that are energizing you. So unhealthy habits of thought, there's a lot of them. A lot of them are common. A lot of them are very socially acceptable. But they do not lead to the outcomes we want. So self-criticism, low self-esteem, denial, not believing we're capable. If we don't know how to do something, then we have to believe we're capable of learning how to do it. Addictions, being overly cautious, cynicism, suppressing emotions, negative rumination is spending time focused on what we don't want. Awfulizing or catastrophizing involves thinking that something is permanent, pervasive, and personal, which means that we can't change it. It's permanent. It's pervasive. If we fail at one thing, we're a failure, as opposed to that wasn't the right thing for us. All sorts of things like that. Identifying these, don't beat yourself up if you have them. Simply decide to develop healthier habits of thought. Healthier habits of thought are self-supportive, optimism, increasing self-esteem, and yes, you can do that. When you learn about your emotional guidance, I think that's the best thing to help you with self-esteem, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. Cognitive reappraisal. Using cognitive reappraisal to feel better. Appreciation. A lot of people would say gratitude, but gratitude does not work as well for 2/3 of the people. And for 1/3, it's no different than appreciation. So I prefer appreciation. Having self-supportive beliefs, a healthy happiness contract, which means that you don't put cognitive barriers to your ability to be happy. Leaning towards thoughts that support positive emotions and healthy relationships, and developing knowledge that helps you increase your ability to develop and sustain healthy habits of thought. So when you develop healthy habits of thought, it gives you the ability to get above this maze and reach your goals, whether those are personal goals, health goals, business goals, it doesn't matter. Traditional, normal, in the box thinking leaves you down here in the maze. Delete that slide. Okay, really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about quantum physics. Don't freak out, it's not complicated. What we want creates a wave. Our desire creates a wave in quantum physics. Our belief about that desire creates a second wave. When those waves are coherent, so when you look at this first example under constructive interference, wave 1 and wave 2 are coherent. Somebody wants something and they believe they can have it. Well, the resulting wave on the quantum level is magnified. There's more power. It helps you succeed. On the other hand, if somebody wants something but doesn't believe they can have it, depending on how they're looking at it, if they want it but they think it's going to be really hard and take a long time and they might not get there, then they get this kind of unorganized line, and it really indicates that they don't really have good power going on. If it's the opposite, I want to be a movie star, but there's no way I'll ever be a movie star. It flatlines. There is no power in that. And they can feel that in the energy that goes on with that. So I created this illustration to indicate how our thoughts and our words are creating on the quantum level of energy. So if you say, for example, I can't and no one can, you have zero power. You got that flat line going on. If you're over here and you say when I X, I might be able to, you've still got a fractional thing going on, but it's a big fraction. So you've got 75% of your power going on there. If you say, I think I can, then you're getting coherence between what you want and what you think you can have. And you've got 50 times the power that you had when you didn't know if you could. So this is a really helpful thing. If you find yourself saying these phrases that have a diminished power, you might want to rephrase the way you think about it and create new beliefs and speak new words about it. And there's another important factor I want to put in here for the health industry. The nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect. It's a negative outcome from a negative suggestion or an expectation of something going wrong. It's as real as the placebo effect. So if a doctor tells a patient you're not likely to survive, that's basically, and the patient wants to survive, that's a 0 or a 25. And if the patient believes that doctor who's saying that, it's creating a nocebo effect. It's actually going against the Hippocratic Oath. It is harming the patient. There's a lot of research to back this up. I have a brief that I have developed based on that research. If you're interested, let me know. On the other hand, the placebo effect, that you can beat this, and being encouraging can help somebody overcome an illness or live with a good quality of life with an illness. There's that constructive power. Our words have power, both in our own minds and when we relay them to others. Now, they only have power if others accept them, and we always have the ability to reject what someone else says that invokes a nocebo effect. We also, and many people do this, reject words that create a placebo effect or would create one if we accepted them. So understanding what is going to support the outcomes you want can be really important. It's way easier to change your behavior. That works way better than education. I'm going to skip that one. Short-term symptoms of unmanaged stress. I think you're going to get this. I'm going to leave it in here because I want you to see that. And here's some more warning signs and indicators of stress. And then, so what works? We see that our level of stress impacts our decisions about our behaviors. Lowering our level of stress automatically leads to better pro-health decisions, better sleep, better relationships, more resources, and a body that functions well. There's that chart that's in your handouts about beliefs. That one. This is a final process I'm going to cover. There's a lot of different processes that can be used for advanced stress management strategies. If you are feeling strong negative emotion, you're being specific and you're being negative. If you reach for thoughts that are more general in nature, you can feel better about the situation right now. So, everything always goes wrong for me. That's very specific and very negative. So, general and negative. Sometimes things go wrong for me, but sometimes they don't. Not even reaching for sometimes they go right. I'm just going to say sometimes they don't go wrong. That feels way better. You can get very specific here. Every time X happens, then this outcome happens. Or every time I need so-and-so, they're not there for me. Or every time whatever. And work your way around, reaching for general and negative first. Once you get stable in general and negative, when you really feel like, okay, I'm here, I'm just feeling generally negative, you can reach across and try to find a generally positive thought. Very general. The thing that people always say, will this matter in 5 years, is a way to find a general positive thought. You say, no, it's not really going to matter in 5 years. Or you could say something, if it will matter in 5 years, you can say things like, I don't have to solve this today. So moving in that direction. Once you're stable and general and positive, if you want, you can move on to specific and positive. It's okay to stay general and positive. Although if you do that on most subjects, you'll get bored. And you might even go back over to the other side because it's kind of more fun to feel more emotions than blah, which general and positive. It's kind of like, when you first get in the hot tub, it feels fantastic. But if you had to stay in that hot tub forever, you would be really, really bored, and well, your skin would be like a raisin. But anyway, so this example shows you, and try this with different things. And again, don't start with the hardest thing. Don't get in that Formula 500 car. Start with something simpler. You'll feel the thrill, because the thrill of changing how you feel just because you want to is huge, even if it's just something that is mildly irritating. Delete that slide, delete that slide. Keep that slide. Okay. There are a lot of different strategies that are being promoted. Resilience, psychological capital, psychological flexibility, burnout prevention, growth mindset. All these different strategies are out there, and for a lot of people making decisions for their employees, what should I do? It seems complex and confusing. So what I've done here is I've created a chart that shows lower level factors that are part of those higher level factor. And you can see that all the way down the line, an internal locus of control, the belief that your thoughts, words, and actions make a difference in your life, is important. Healthy self-esteem is important to most of them, and the belief that you're competent is important. Resilience is competent. Optimism and hope are important. So understanding that it really doesn't matter a whole lot which one of these that you focus on, because if you get those key components, then it's going to give you big chunks, if not all, of the other aspects. You have a handout that has the citations for this. This one's horizontal, that one's vertically established, but it's the same basic information. Although that one doesn't, the one with citations doesn't have burnout and celitogenesis because I haven't added those two yet, but there's plenty of citations to support this. Well, that's a really good diagram. Maybe keep, but I'm slide that one. And thank you very much. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation and that it was helpful to you. If you'd like to reach me, you can contact me by leaving a comment here. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter, Janine Joy Joy. And you can find me on our website, happinessfirst.com.